When I was young, I never needed anyone, and making love was just for fun. Those days are gone. Living alone, I think of all the friends I've known. When I dial the telephone, nobody's home. All by myself, don't wanna be all by myself anymore. All by myself, don't wanna live all by myself anymore. Hard to be sure, sometimes I feel so insecure, and love so distant.
Ready?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Hello. This is a commemorative video celebrating the 40th reunion of the Omaha Westside graduating class of 1977. My name is Bob Loblaw, and I had the distinct privilege recently of speaking with about 12 members of the 1977 Warriors. Our intent here is to relive some happy memories and maybe hear some stories for the first time. Now, I should warn you, the people we're talking to are almost 60 years old. Yeah, right? So if they start repeating themselves or if they start mumbling incoherently, let's just let it go, okay? All right, so let's do this. Would you tell me your name and what you do for a living?
My name is Andy Shack, and I am a home inspector in Omaha, and I've been doing that for close to 30 years.
Craig Johnson, and I'm with Johnson Realty in Omaha.
My name is Deb Hartford-Shadell, and I sell drugs. I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep.
I am Tom Rice. I am the sales manager at Regal Awards here in Omaha. I've been there almost 22 years. We simply put, sell anything that's got a company logo on it.
Tim Zweiback, and more than anything, I do what my wife and kids tell me to do, but I practice a little law and do some transactional business and try to paint and sculpt a bit.
Candy Wenzel King, and I'm a salesperson. I sell technology solutions for a large financial services institution.
Dennis Pfeffer, I'm an insurance producer, so commercial insurance.
Rich Secor, commercial real estate broker.
Lisa Pate Verbeck, and I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep for AbbVie, used to be Abbott Laboratories. I'm going on my 20th year, so I just won the National Sales Award, #2 in the nation, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Tom Baker, I'm a sales development consultant.
Gary Niver, owner, Niver Electronics.
My name is Steve Adam. I never had a full-time job, but I do enjoy photography as a hobby, investing with people.
When you were at Westside, what clubs and activities were you involved with?
Well, mostly with sports. I was kind of a freelance sport person where I did football my first year, switched to tennis the next year, but the main sport was track, which I ran all my years up at Westside.
I was an athlete, so I spent a lot of time on the football field, spent a lot of time playing baseball, but it seemed like with athletics you were always, your time was taken a lot, and so that was, what I was involved in.
Oh boy. The biggest activity I was involved with was swimming, and swimming. And then I think I was in that one club that you got out of school early to work, DECA. And I was in the drinking club, Council Bluffs.
I was a swimmer for a short amount of time, and I was drill squad, which was the dance club. Dance club. Everybody thinks it's like ROTC when I say drill squad.
I was on the tennis team. All 3 years I was there. I was in Interact. I was in the W Club. Went to a lot of sporting events. Just was as active as I could, but I wasn't a great joiner. I wasn't in a lot of different clubs.
Well, my junior year, I was involved with everything. I was in girls basketball, golf, Z Club, I was a squire, both my junior and senior year, Spanish Club, Teenage Young Republicans, all those kind of fun things.
Really, the only thing was swimming, so that took a heck of a lot of time between swimming and some of the mandatory extracurricular activities that were the most time consuming.
Well, activities, I was in probably football, intramurals. That's pretty much it. I worked, I was in DECA, so I worked at Snowden Mize Sporting Goods. With Barry, I met Barry O'Halloran there and Paul Linden. So that was fun. We had a lot of fun. Clubs, Depot Lounge, Joker, other place, place like that was where we spent our time. Oh, and what was the name of it? The Quebec Lounge, of course. Okay.
I was involved in Interact, Student Council, and soccer.
Sports.
I played soccer. I was involved with Interact. Those are the two that come to mind right now.
That's a good question. I can't think of anything at the moment.
What do you remember most about your senior year at Westside?
I've been thinking about the people, I think. I was really lucky because athletics got me around a lot of people in the class, and so I had a pretty, I guess, wide range of friends, and I look back and I'm grateful for that. Other things I remember, I was kind of a car guy, and so they had the shop class down there, and I always enjoyed that. And the thing I remember now looking back is some of the cars that these guys drove, and the values of them today. It's really, we were in a great era, as we really were, and then the other thing I remember was the music. If you go back and reflect on all the bands that were big, or all the older guys that are coming back today, and it was Chicago, it was Aerosmith, the Doobie Brothers. Yeah, those are the things I remember. It was a lot of fun.
You know what? I open campus, so I was gone a lot, but I remember that we were old enough to go to the bars. So we'd all drive to Council Bluffs, and that was our favorite pastime. Horrible, but true.
How much fun it was. I've talked to people over the years, and they say, I didn't really enjoy my high school experience very much. And I mean, next to college, it was absolutely the most fun 3 years I had. So I loved it.
My senior year, well, it was fun. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of things we probably shouldn't have done, like go to Council Bluffs and go to the Joker and the Depot. I remember I used to work at Yonker Kilpatrick's, and I'd take my paycheck over and probably spend most of that at the Depot Lounge.
I think the extracurricular activities created a situation where I don't have any memories, and the activities that we had to do extracurricularly led to memory loss.
Oh, it was just a social cesspool, basically is I guess a good explanation. We just had a lot of fun. It was go to school, and what are we going to do? Where are we going to have lunch? And, I didn't study once, I don't think, the whole time. But it was fun. We had fun, and that was really the goal, was to have a good time in high school.
Oh, the parties. Council Bluffs, Pogos, Joker.
Where was Pogos?
72nd Pacific.
That's right. They had mud wrestling.
We used to go pick up a bottle of wine at West Liquor to drive over to Council Bluffs unless Norm Morley was still working.
I think it would be almost missing graduation. I went with a few of us out water skiing the day we were supposed to be at graduation, and let's just say we had a very good time, and we forgot to come back until all of a sudden we raced back to Omaha, grabbed our stuff, and got down to the Civic Auditorium barely in time to make the graduation. And let's just say that our parents would have been none too happy with us that we blew off the day water skiing and almost just barely made it back in time.
Are there any classes or IMCs that stand out to you from your time at Westside?
You know, the one class that I always loved was my class with Tom Hall, Coach Hall, and it was humanities, and he always made it a little bit controversial. He talked a little bit about racy items, which kind of made it fun when you're 17, 18 years of age. Still makes it fun.
You know, I ended up hanging out in the social studies IMC. I had a little flirtation with AP history and such, and Mr. McCormick and Mr. Pearson I got to be really good friends with. They coached the girls' tennis team, which I helped with. So I ended up hanging out in there and studying in there, and it was a great atmosphere. It was right off the cafeteria, so it was close by. And
Definitely social studies, IMC. That's where I spent most of my time. And I remember one time I went in there and sat down, something was burning on my leg. Somebody had put sulfuric acid on the chair, and I sat in it and burned a hole through my skirt, so that was not fun. Kind of crazy.
Not particularly. I think we hung out in the cafeteria or the IMC next to the cafeteria.
Really, the things that stand out to me is probably the lunchroom, you know, because that's where everybody met. And you would just go. I didn't spend any time in IMCs. I don't know that, you know, I spent 0 time in IMCs. But the lunchroom we would go, and that's where we'd plan our day. And, you know, really though, I ended up working a lot. I was one of those guys that, you know, I had a car, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I worked, you know, and that's how I got my spending money.
Oh, I remember hanging out in the social studies IMC, math IMC. Probably the most memorable class would be probably English Comp, trying to get through English composition. That was a tough class for me.
I spent a lot of time in the math IMC, and I'm not sure why, but it was just quiet, you know, and I was kind of a math nerd back in those days, and so I spent a lot of time in the math IMC. I remember the biology class and chemistry and physics, and it was just fun to kind of have hands-on in those classes. I enjoyed that a lot.
I wasn't a real good student. You know, I did what I had to do. I always remember that it seemed like the coaches' classes, and that would have been Don Johnson and Dan Young, Tom Hall. Those classes I probably put a little more effort in, so I excelled a little more in them, and I think there was a means behind that. So.
Physics class always fun with Hilly the Mole, and events of Hilly the Mole. Okay. And we remember back in the corner of the map IMC was in the other room, a teletype terminal with the round keys and the printer. This had to be the year before, had to be the summer year before the personal computer introduced the Apple I, the Apple II, I mean.
Yeah. Apple II came out in '77, I think, right?
Yes, right after we graduated.
Yep. Which teachers do you remember most from your senior year?
Well, the teacher I remember the most was Cal Bentz. He was my swim coach from age 8 on, so I knew him the best.
Senior Brodsky, I went through junior high all the way through high school with him, and he was my homeroom teacher. And I still say I spoke Spanish because speak Spanish because I took 80 years of Spanish with Senior Brodsky.
You know, I remember going to California on one of Harley Hardison's trips. That was quite an adventure. Yeah, he was really a character. Pearson was great. My tennis coach, Paul Nyholm, was a really interesting character. Yeah, those guys were all a lot of fun.
Senior Brodsky, the Spanish teacher. He used to teach us naughty words in Spanish, but he was fun, and that was a great. He was a great teacher. He was always having fun with everybody.
You know, as I think back about it, and I mean this in all seriousness, I remember Bill McCormick, Mr. McCormick, being just an outstanding human being who really taught you to be a better person, taught you to think critically. I think Tom Hall, the English teacher, was exceptional. I didn't know Mr. Hall from any relationship to class. I remember him teaching Shakespeare, teaching about a Cezanne painting in humanities, and I mean, I thought, wow, I learned some new things, and he would open up very, very much about himself, and I think those two guys really stand out to me.
Yeah, you know, I wrote a few down here. Teachers. I would say my homeroom teacher was Mr. Schleifer, and who better to have for a homeroom teacher than the Dean of Boys? I mean, so he got me out of a lot of trouble. Harley Hardison, biology. I actually took biology as a senior, which was unusual. There was a gal named Tina Rowe. She was my business teacher. She was like a first-year teacher, and I actually would run into her at the Quebec Lounge every once in a while. But Dan Young, of course, algebra. Mrs. Winslow was probably one of the most inspirational teachers that I had. I became a CPA after college, and she was my accounting 1 and 2 teacher. And I went into college thinking I was going to be a psychology major because of who was it? McCormick. McCormick was my sociology teacher, and I just loved that guy, and I loved the message that he gave us, and so I thought, psychology, I'm going to do it. I didn't take one psychology class in college. Another thing I wanted to do in college was art, because inspirational teacher that I had was Al Vapp. He was really good, and but I didn't take one art class either. Ended up as an accountant.
I remember I did remember all the artistic classes, and have forgotten about Paul Nyholm.
Yeah,
but those were fun.
Two that stand out: Harley Hardison, who taught biology and maybe it was physiology. Just a character, related very well to students. Had a great, funny lectures. The other would be Tom Hall, who taught humanities. Tom was a very, very deep thinker. I remember one day he asked our class, what's your favorite day of the week? And a lot of people said, Saturday or Sunday or Friday, because, it was like the weekend. He said, think about what day is the best day where you kind of anticipate something good to happen. And he said, think about this class, think about maybe Thursday being maybe the best day of the week because you anticipate the weekend, you anticipate being off and, having leisure and so forth. And that really resonated with me.
Hall, Crampton, is that right?
Ron Crampton?
Yeah, Ron Crampton, and Hardison, of course, Hardison.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably a very easy one, that would be Bob Klein. Because not only was he the head track coach, but he was my personal coach for hurdles. And when I took his classes, we just had a lot of fun with his classes, and I got to know him even after Westside.
I'm going to use an example. Don Johnson was an accounting teacher, but Don was my head football coach, and I was fortunate in the later part of my life. I'm in the real estate business, been in it for 30-some years. I got into it via Don Johnson, and that was one of his sidelines. So through the course of that, I spent a lot of time in the latter years of his life and the middle of my life, and that was special to me. So not so much a teacher as a friend and kind of a confidant in my business. And Don worked for me for the last 10 to 12 years of his career. So
I think King Inkleby, the physics team, and for some reason, one English teacher popped out of my head, Donago.
Speaking of teachers, we're thrilled to have two of them here with us today. Can you tell us about your career at Westside and what you taught in 1977?
In 1977, I was teaching economics and AP US history. I had just come back from the University of Nebraska when you guys were juniors. I wasn't there, and I taught mainly junior classes. And maybe there's some kind of connection there because my best friends are in a class that I actually didn't have many of you in class. In 77, I was back to teaching economics and U.S. history and just taught one class at the University of Nebraska at night.
Okay, I started in 71 and finished in 2009. So I had 38 years. I did have a couple years, well, 1 year where I went to Australia and taught there for a year in 88. I taught, in your class, I taught U.S. history and AP history. But over the career, it was almost everything in social studies except psychology.
Which teachers stand out to you from those days at Westside?
Oh, Lang and Klein got to. I mean, in my high school, I think there were 12 kids took physics. And a doctor, he had a real PhD. He had a real PhD, not a EED or something. He had a real PhD in physics. And then Klein, and they get out there in that hall with those slinkies running. I don't know what they were teaching them, but they were teaching an awful lot of them. And there were a lot of kids learned a lot of physics from those two people.
There's a lot of people I could name, but I kind of was gearing towards colleagues I had because we had these team projects where everything was taught by all of us. So we kind of shared the ideas of the curriculum and everything. And so the person who probably helped me the most was a guy named Rod Carr, who we taught U.S. history together. We were about the same age. The irony of ironies is I student taught there and they didn't have an opening. So I couldn't get a job. The draft board kept saying they were going to get me. They didn't get me. I went to work at Corbally Shoes and Rod got drafted. And I took his job at Westside, and so I thought that was kind of funny. And then he got out of the Army 3 years later, and there was an opening at Westside, and he was back there. So it was kind of interesting in that sense.
Does any particular event or any particular student stand out to you from the class of 1977?
I'll tell you what I remember, and it could have been 75 or 76, maybe when you guys were sophomores, and probably the story is more accurate then. I did the scariest thing I ever did at Westside High School. Scared the living bejesus out of me. What I did was somebody asked me to judge the drill squad tryouts. And I go, sure, well, gotta get some cute girls. I was heading around and watch girls dance for a while. That'll be neat. And then I started thinking about it, about how, like Craig Johnson, hell, he'd been a running back since he was 6 years old. Sharp's been swam forever. Munster, he'd been shooting baskets with his dad out in the yard. Everything else, people, the things that were really important to them in their life, they did over and over and over again. But these poor girls walked out there in front of some no-mind like me, and a minute and 15 seconds or something in this little routine, they're supposed to convince me that they belonged on the drill squad. And we all know how important that drill squad was. And I went to the bathroom and almost threw up before I started judging the drill squad. Scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, well, a lot of them, but and a lot of them came afterwards because I ended up playing softball with 5 or 6 of them, little slow pitch softball, and I was hobbled up with a bad knee, so they let me pitch, which was kind of nice, and it was fun. So I kept contact for a long time. But I had a student, we had an assignment back then, I'm gonna get real quick, and it used to be an oral history thing, and at that time, they had grandparents that were alive in the 20s and 30s, so they could go and talk to them about what it was like to grow up at that time. So they'd make this little oral history tape. And Colleen Skinner made this tape, and then I would listen to it, and then select a couple parts, and then we'd all listen to them in class. And she was talking to her grandfather, and was asked a lot of things about the 20s and this and that and everything. And there was this very popular book in the 20s called The Man Nobody Knew. And so she's going through this interview and talking. She says, Grandpa, did you know the man nobody knew? And he goes, no. And then it just went on, and she didn't stop. He didn't ask, who is this guy or anything. It just was dead silence after that. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And you learn a little bit about, you know, you're supposed to have follow-up questions and things, and it was just funny. I played it, and Colleen just died laughing when I said, why didn't you ask something else, you know, something through? But it stuck in me forever. It's one of those little funny moments that you have, you know, that are just the little gems that you had. I guess you had to be there to really enjoy it, but it was funny. The man nobody knew.
Well, I love hearing how you guys collaborated, you know, all the teachers.
We had big team meetings, and we'd plan large groups that way, and to me, it was what kept me teaching as long as I did, because I wasn't stuck in a room by myself to become an old grouchy man that, you know, because you're just in your room all the time. And so the IMC was a very, you know, to me, a vibrant place and healthy and all that. And interacting with students, kicking a few out every now and then was part of the joy.
Do you have a favorite story from your senior year that you're willing to share with the world today?
You know, I really don't have a favorite story. I have so many great memories, but not one favorite story, just great memories.
You know, it's not a super juicy one, but when I first came into the district, I was brand new, so I didn't go to Arbor or any of those things. And I'm walking down the hallway, and it's just me in this hallway, and I'm walking down, and walking toward me is the legendary swim coach, Cal Bentz. And at the time, I was about 5'6", and I had size 11 shoes, so I was a little out of proportion. And he's walking toward me, and I know him, of course he doesn't know me, and he stops me and he looks at me and he looks down at my feet. He says, "You swim, son?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Too bad." And he just kept walking. And it's the only words the man ever spoke to me in my 3 years at Westside, but I remember it like it was yesterday.
Favorite story? Oh gosh, let me think. Wow, there was so many things that happened. Stories that I remember was Jay Jansen and, I don't know, all those guys that he hung out with, driving. They got a car for $25 and just took it out and beat it, and ended up down in Pipple Park, and they just trashed the car. It was kind of crazy.
No. There were a lot of fun events, and most of them are best remembered by those who were participants.
I do have one that I've thought about, you know, trying to keep it all positive. And you know, when we were in a senior year, it was me and some of the guys from Snowden Mize, Paul Linden, Barry O'Halloran. We were planning, and Gene Hamilton and these guys, we were planning a big party at 192nd and Harrison. We had a party out there. And the forecast was rain, hail, tornadoes. And I'm like, we had 30 kegs reserved at the liquor store. And so we were 18 years old, you know, but anyway, I called Dale Munson at WW Channel 6. He was the weathercaster and Munson's dad. And I asked him, you know, what the real weather, we had this big school activity that was going to require a lot of planning and a lot of, you know, build up, and I just wanted to know if he could tell me if we were going to be okay after like 8 o'clock on Friday night, and he assured me that it'd be fine. So anyway, it worked out well, and we all had a great time. I don't remember much after probably 10 o'clock then.
You know, the most memorable would be senior year when a lot of the guys dressed up as the drill squad members, and we all danced during the halftime of a basketball game, and we danced to the song Head East, Never Any Reason, and it was quite an event. It was very funny. I think the audience enjoyed it, and we certainly did.
What comes to mind was Hardison trip. We drove to California in '75, I think, so I was probably a sophomore, junior, and we were camping out on the beach, 3 nights out there somewhere, and we went and saw The Exorcist. And I finished that, and then we go back to the campsite, and we're all just scared to death, sleeping in a tent on the beach after watching The Exorcist at 17. That's a nightmare. It's crazy.
Well, a favorite story. I think what I would do is say maybe not when I was a senior, but in school when we were younger. There was myself and Kyle Trigg, who had our driver's licenses almost a year before everybody else, and we liked to play with the bouncers and skip out. And we had a lot of good times with them, and they knew what we were doing in our routines, and we would actually put spies up to see where they were at. And I drove a car over there and sometimes parked it in the senior lot. And I got told several times not to do that, and they finally said that they were going to tow my car if I did it again. So the next day, it was an old Scout, and it had a snowplow on the front of it. And I think it was spring. It definitely wasn't snowing. So I showed up with my Scout with the plow blade attached, backed it into a parking spot in the senior lot, and dropped the blade. And that's where it sat all day. They couldn't tow it. But let's just say we had another conversation, and I didn't do that anymore.
I could go into a lot of different stories with different people, but I'm gonna beg off on that. But a quick story I'll tell you is, and this relates to Don and the football coaches. I was a sophomore, and everybody remembers, you know, Jay Jansen had some pretty good parties, and I think everybody had a first story of when they went out and drank a little bit. So we were out partying, and I was a Prairie Lane kid, so I hung around Scott Frederickson, Kevin Kunkel, Steve Krause, Dennis Pfeffer, some of those guys. Well, we went to a basketball game, and we had a little bottle of sloe gin, and you know, we probably didn't drink that much, but we drank enough to feel it. So we go into Big Fred's on 108th, not the original, but I thought I was doing pretty good and stuff. Well, you know, unbeknownst to me, here sits all the coaches having pizza that night. And so I'm up there talking to them, and I walk out of there, and I'm thinking, well, I think I handled that pretty well. And sure enough, that Monday, Don Johnson calls me to the carpet and kind of knew. So we had a runaround, but I always appreciated how he handled that, because, you know, my football career could have been over really quick. And so maybe that was, I looked up to him a lot for that, so.
My parents let me drive their car with 5 other girls to Padre Island for spring break. So that was a wild and crazy road trip with the Atlas and figuring out gas and able to drink. So yeah, that was my big trip.
Who had the best parties?
The people that I don't remember.
Parties?
Oh, definitely Jay Jansen. Whenever his parents went out of town, he always had a party, and somehow there was always a hole kicked in the wall, and parents always had to repair that, but he had crazy parties all the time.
Rumor has it my brother had some pretty good ones, especially after state swim meets.
Well, I tend to think we did. You know, we had good parties. Wyback had a farm. We would have parties out there. We would had parties at Ventilus Park. I mean, you know, it was little known who really was having the parties at the time, but we had a few parties, and there were some guys from Prep in Central that also had parties, and we kind of played off of what they were doing, and it worked out pretty good. But we had some big parties. Yeah.
Probably Jay Jensen.
Well, it's, of course, Jay. The question, which one? Was it the one that they crashed and burned down at the Livestock Exchange building? Or is it over at McWhorter's house? When I dialed the phone when we were crank calling, and we called his house, and his mom answered, and he asked he said, "Hey, baby, you want to rub it?" And he got off, he slammed and she said, Jay, is that you? And he said, slammed the phone down. He said, "That voice sounded awful familiar."
The guys, I think it was Pfeffer that put on those ones way out at the farm, 190th and Q. Those things were epic.
What'd you do at the parties?
I was one of the bus boys.
Oh, for us, that would have had to be Jay Jansen. He had parties almost every time his parents left town, and they were, let's just say, well attended and a lot of fun, and we got to know his parents very well.
Jay had some good parties. The ones I remember were out on 192nd and Harrison, and that was the old schoolhouse. way out in Millard. It was cornfields at the time, but what a great little place to go hang out, and I think everybody kind of hit that once or twice in their life, so.
Well, the swimmers really had the best parties, and I can think of a couple parties at the Zweiback house that probably were at the top of the list.
Who had the best parties? Well, I would say early on in the days, probably like Dave Maynor used to have great parties, but that was early in high school. And then we all went to these prep parties that were called Boogie Brother parties that were out in the country somewhere. And we'd pay $1 to get all the beer we could drink, and I don't like beer. It was a tough dollar.
When you think about a reunion, 40 years is a long time. Is there anybody from your senior class that you do not want to run into this weekend?
Yeah, Kathy Morrow and like Julie Ebner and Nancy Harris.
Terry O'Halloran, his brother Barry.
Matt Jetter, Bob Bergwin, Brett Perry, Todd Engel, Barry O'Halloran, and Paul Linden, and Tim Zweiback, or John Pfeiffer, and Mike Mendelcino.
Primarily Clark Camphy, Bruce Anderson, Dave Maynor, Dave Bunkers, Mike Brown.
George Proud, Barry James, Jay Jansen, Jim McWhorter.
Kyle Trigg, Tony Church, John Zimmerman, Jim McWhorter, Gary Niver, George Proud.
Kelly Spires Williams and Candy Wenzel King.
Deb Hartford, Deb Shadell, Debbie and Kelly Spires, Cindy Haggerty, Holly Broadbent, Mary Egan.
Mike Austin, Rob Lind, Christine Schosch, Amy Frost, Ann Thompson.
If you were to go back in time and relive high school, what would you do differently, or what advice would you give yourself?
I'd say this, and again, being serious about what a great group of people, and seek out more diversity in the friends, seek out people, make a real effort to go meet people who have other interests that are far different from yours, and see what you can learn from them, because there were so many great people that I could have taken better advantage and learned a hell of a lot more from than I did.
Well, probably, I probably would have been a little bit more involved with school activities.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun. I probably would have, I would have played golf, tried out for the golf team. I probably wouldn't have made it, but it would have been good, but I didn't realize they had clubs like Outside Club and Foreign Club and, things that would have really been interesting. I think I would have gotten a lot more out of it, but besides that, I don't think I would have changed a thing. It all worked out pretty well, Westside was a great place, a lot of fun.
Probably not let senioritis set in, and that certainly set in with me spring semester. I just couldn't wait to graduate. Like all of us, we were just kind of tired of it. We wanted to move on with our lives. But it's funny how, in retrospect, you look back thinking, maybe we shouldn't have had that attitude, and we should have just kind of maybe more enjoyed the moment then.
One thing I always did before school, I always went around the hallway and talked to people.
Yeah.
And I always got to know the two tallest person in school. That the class before me, the 76, Mike Halstead and Rick Graham. Rick Graham had to be in my homeroom.
I would study more. I would have a more specific plan of why are you hanging out in the math IMC all the time? But I'd probably be more social. I'd just be more involved. But there's not a lot I would change. I think it was just a terrific experience, and I think we're all pretty lucky.
Advice I'd give myself would be to study more, and when it comes to my senior year, partying should still be to the weekends instead of every night of the week. And mostly study. My boys all went to Westside, and that's what I preached to them. And let's just say that we had a really good time in high school, and I paid for that my first year in college.
It's funny because I look at high school and I look at my senior year, Tom, and I had a lot of fun. I had no regrets. There wouldn't be many things I would change, I don't think. If I could do it over again, I'd maybe I'd maybe involve or engage in classroom stuff a little bit more. It would be nice to see the other side of not being an athlete because of the time constraints that took, and things that I probably missed out on that maybe could have made a difference in a guy's life. You never know. So,
what I would do differently, I would swim less and have more friends and travel more.
You know, and I don't know if it's so much in high school. I just have memories, and I read a lot about bullying, and I think I was a little bit of a bully. I think I probably picked on kids when I shouldn't have, so I should probably have been a nicer girl, but I guess it didn't do any harm to people. I haven't been approached at any reunions with bad stories, but I think I was a bully.
Not very much. I don't have any real regrets. I might have tried to join a few more things. As you look through the yearbook, you know, it's not like nowadays when there's a website that lists all the things that are available to do. And I look through the yearbook now, and I don't remember half of the things that are listed there that I had access to doing. You know, certain outdoor clubs, I mean, just, you know, different things that, you know, maybe at the time I would have never found attractive, but in looking back, I was like, I don't even remember that being offered. But I mean, Westside, and still is, offers a huge array of different things that you can do.
Well, there you have it, words of wisdom. Now let's take a look back at the cultural events that took place during our time in high school.
Kids are godfathers. Bullshit. Leave them at home. I don't want no kids in my joint. Kids are nothing but trouble. They come in, they throw pizza all over the floor, they spill Coke. Leave the brats at home. I don't want no part of them. Get out of here. Send them to the Pizza Hut. What?
Yes, I'd love to tour the Southland in a traveling minstrel show. Yes, I'm down to be a star and make them laugh. Sound just like a record on a phonograph. Those days are gone forever, over a long time ago. Oh yeah. Let me tell you, I got some
but time makes you bolder. Even children get older, and I'm getting older too.
There's ringing in my ears, and no one to relate to, save the sea. Who can I believe in? I'm bleeding on the floor. There has to be a force who do I call. The stars are out and shining, but all I really wanna love, to show me the way every day. There she stood in the doorway, I heard the mission bell, and I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven and this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle and she showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor, I thought I heard them say, welcome to the Hotel California. Listen to the wind blow, watch the sun rise. Run in the shadows, damn your love, damn your life.
Now, he's not letting up at all. He's going to drive the second. The ball is bobbled out center, and here comes the throw, and what a throw. He's going to slide in head first. Here he comes. He's out. No